When I lost my voice, I didn't realize how quickly silence could turn people cruel. The hospital room smelled faintly of disinfectant and warm plastic, the kind that sticks to your skin when you've been lying too long on clean sheets. I could hear the monitor beeping steadily beside me, a metronome for my new reality. My throat burned when I tried to swallow, and when I opened my mouth to call for the nurse, nothing came out, not a sound, just air, thin, desperate, useless. They told me later that the surgery had gone well. "You're lucky," the doctor said, smiling the kind of smile that's meant to comfort you while your world unravels. "Your vocal cords just need time to heal. A few weeks, maybe months, a few months. That's how long I was supposed to be patient, silent, waiting for my voice to return, while my life slowly slipped into someone else's hands. My husband, Malik, stood by the window that day, scrolling through his phone. The sunlight caught on his wedding band, glinting against the sterile white walls. When he noticed me looking at him, he smiled faintly and said, "It's gonna be fine, babe. You'll be talking my ear off again soon." He said it playfully, but he didn't come closer. And in that moment, even without words, I felt a shift, something small but sharp. The kind of distance that starts as a whisper and grows into an echo. Before all this, before the hospital, I used to talk for a living. I was a school counselor, the kind who could calm angry parents and reassure trembling students. My voice was my tool, my anchor. I'd learned to read emotion in tone, a sigh, a tremble, a laugh. I believed words could heal almost anything. Funny how life tests the very thing you think defines you. At home, Malik and I had been married just 2 years. We were still learning the rhythm of each other, the way he liked his coffee strong and black, how I left the window cracked at night for the breeze. We didn't have much, just a small apartment with creaky floors and mismatched furniture. But we had plans. We were saving for a house, maybe a baby next year. He used to call me his voice of reason. Sometimes I wonder if that's why he left when mine went quiet. The accident happened one rainy night. I'd been driving home from school after a late parent meeting when a delivery truck skidded through a red light. I remember the flash of headlights, the crunch of metal, and then nothing. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed with stitches down my neck and a bandage that felt too tight. The doctor said a piece of glass had torn into my throat, damaging my vocal cords. "You'll need rest," he said, "and support." I looked at Malik then, my husband, my supposed support, and his eyes darted away. At first, he tried. I'll give him that. He'd bring flowers, silent dinners, awkward smiles, but as the days turned into weeks, his visits shortened. He started checking his watch more. When I scribbled notes asking how work was going, he'd answer in clipped tones. "Busy. Stressful. I can't do this every day, you know." I'd nod, swallowing my hurt along with the hospital soup. Because what could I say? I couldn't say anything. When I was finally discharged, I went home to a space that felt foreign. Dust on the shelves, mail piled on the counter. My favorite mug cracked. Malik seemed restless, irritated by the quiet. He'd sigh when I tried to write something down to communicate. "You don't have to write everything," he said one night, flipping channels on the couch. "It's exhausting watching you struggle." I stared at him. The pen trembled in my hand. I wanted to scream, "It's exhausting living it." But all that came out was silence. So I smiled instead. A fragile, practiced smile that didn't reach my eyes. My mother called every night, her voice a lifeline through the static of my loneliness. "He's just scared, baby," she said gently. "Men don't know how to handle things like this. Be patient, patience." That word again. Everyone wanted me to wait, for my voice, for Malik's love to steady, for the world to stop spinning long enough for me to catch my breath. But love, I learned, doesn't wait for brokenness. It either stays through it, or it leaves quietly when you stop looking. The first real clue came one evening when Malik forgot to log out of his laptop. He was in the shower, humming, while I sat at the table trying to type an email with my half-healed fingers. The screen glowed, his inbox open. I wasn't snooping. Not at first. But then I saw it, an unread message with the subject line, "Last night was everything." My stomach dropped. I clicked it before I could stop myself. "I can still smell your cologne on my pillow. I don't know what we're doing, but it feels right." Signed, Talia. I knew that name. She was the woman from his office. The one who'd come to visit once when I was still in the hospital, bringing flowers and fake sympathy. My hands shook as I closed the laptop. The sound of the shower running felt miles away, like I was underwater. I could barely breathe. I wanted to confront him, to shout, to demand answers. But the cruel irony was that I couldn't speak. My voice, the very thing I'd once used to stand up for others, had abandoned me when I needed it most. So I waited. I waited for the water to stop, for him to come out, for the right moment to find some way, any way to make him hear me. But that night, when he emerged wrapped in a towel and smiled that same careless smile, all I could do was meet his eyes in silence. He didn't even notice the storm in mine. That was the moment I realized. Sometimes silence isn't peace. It's punishment, and mine had only just begun. The morning after I saw that email, the world felt colder, not just outside, but inside my chest. Malik moved around the apartment like nothing had happened. He hummed while shaving, whistled off-key when tying his shoes. The sound of it grated against my silence. I watched him, wondering if he could feel my eyes on him. If guilt ever made his hands tremble the way mine did. He kissed my forehead before leaving for work, a habit he'd kept even as everything else between us faded. But that morning, the gesture felt practiced, rehearsed. His lips were warm, but his eyes were somewhere else. As the door clicked shut behind him, I sat in the living room and stared at the laptop. The blue light blinked, unread messages piling up like whispers I wasn't supposed to hear. I wanted to open them. I wanted to know, but instead I closed the lid gently, like sealing a wound I wasn't ready to look at. In the weeks that followed, Malik's absences grew longer. He started working late nights, meetings, deadlines. Sometimes he wouldn't come home until midnight, smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. He was careful enough that he never left another message open, careful enough to delete his call logs, but not careful enough to hide his restlessness. He'd sit at dinner, scrolling his phone while I tried to mouth words he didn't want to see. My throat ached every time I tried to make a sound, a croak, a whisper. But all that came out was air. It's strange how quickly someone's silence can make them invisible. He started forgetting I was in the room. One evening, I sat by the window as he spoke on the phone in the hallway. His tone was soft, playful, a version of him I hadn't heard in months. He laughed quietly, and my heart clenched at the sound. I moved closer to the doorway, holding my breath. "Yeah, I'll be there Saturday." "No, she won't come. She can't really do much these days." He chuckled, a sound that sliced through me like a knife. "I'll tell her I've got work. You just pick the place." Then a pause. His voice dropped to a murmur. "You know I miss you." I stepped back, hitting the wall softly. He ended the call moments later and walked into the living room, surprised to see me standing there. For a second, our eyes met. Mine, raw, questioning. His, startled, defensive, then he sighed. "You scared me," he said. "Don't sneak up like that." He brushed past me, avoiding my gaze, and went straight to the kitchen. I stood frozen, my heart beating so loud it drowned out the hum of the refrigerator. I wanted to scream, "You're lying to me, Malik." I wanted to demand that he see me, really see me. But silence wrapped around me like a shroud. The next day, I wrote him a note. It took me nearly an hour to word it right, my handwriting shaky. "You can talk to me, Malik, even if it's hard. Just tell me the truth." I left it on his pillow before he left for work. That night, when I came to bed, the note was gone. No answer. No mention. Nothing. He just rolled over and fell asleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, my throat burning with unshed words. A week later, my friend and coworker, Jasmine, came to visit. She was the only one who didn't treat me like I was fragile. She talked to me, not at me. She sat on the couch, peeling an orange while I scribbled on my notepad. "He's been distant," I wrote. "I think there's someone else." She frowned, tossing a peel into the bowl. "You sure? Malik doesn't seem the type." I shook my head. "I found messages." Her eyes widened. "You did?" I nodded again, feeling tears sting my eyes. She leaned forward, touching my hand. "Then you have to do something." "You can't just sit here," I wrote quickly. "What do I do when I can't even speak for myself?" She was quiet for a long time. Then she said softly, "You start by remembering you still matter, voice or not." Her words lingered long after she left. That night, I tried to find that version of myself, the one who mattered beyond words. I sat at the mirror, tracing the faint scar along my neck. It was pale now, thin as thread, but it carried every memory of pain, of helplessness, of betrayal I couldn't express. I picked up a pen and notebook and started writing, not to Malik this time, but to myself. "You are still here. You are still whole. Your silence is not weakness. It is proof that you survived what tried to destroy you." For the first time in months, I cried. But they weren't the kind of tears that come from despair. They were the kind that carve space for strength. A few days later, Malik's sister Layla stopped by. She had that sweet, polite smile that never reached her eyes. "Hey, how are you?" she asked in a tone that suggested she already knew the answer. I wrote, "I'm healing." She nodded. "That's good. Malik's been worried about you. He says you're not yourself lately." I blinked, surprised. "He said that?" I wrote. Layla smiled faintly. "Yeah, he's been under a lot of pressure, you know. Work's crazy and, well, it's hard for him with everything that's happened to you." The words hit like a slap. Everything that's happened to me. As if I were the problem he was forced to carry. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her it wasn't me who changed first. It was him. But instead, I just nodded, feeling that familiar lump of silence rise again. As she left, she turned at the door. "He's trying, you know. Don't make it harder for him." When the door closed, I sank into the chair and pressed my palms against my eyes. It was happening. The quiet rewriting of truth. The world around me was being told I was the burden, and I didn't have a voice to fight back. That night, Malik came home late again. He smelled of something floral, something expensive. When he saw me awake sitting at the table, he frowned. "You should rest." I stared at him, my pen hovering over paper. Slowly I wrote, "Who is Talia?" He froze. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he laughed, too quickly. "Who told you that?" I held up the note again. My hand was shaking. He sighed, rubbing his temples. "You're overthinking. Talia's just a coworker. Don't do this to yourself." Then he walked past me into the bedroom. The sound of the door closing felt like the final word in a conversation I couldn't have. That night, I didn't sleep. I just lay there, staring into the dark, listening to the sound of his breathing beside me. Calm, steady, peaceful. While inside me, everything was breaking quietly. 2 weeks after that night, I woke to an empty bed. Again. The space beside me was cold, the sheets smooth and untouched. The clock glowed 2:47 a.m. I tried not to panic, tried not to let my mind spiral into every possibility. Maybe he was working late. Maybe he fell asleep on the couch, but the apartment was silent, too silent. I pulled on a sweater and crept into the living room. The couch was empty. His car keys were gone. So was his overnight bag. Something inside me went still. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the window until dawn bled into the sky. Every sound outside, a car door, a dog barking, made my heart lurch. When Malik finally walked in around 7 a.m., he looked startled to see me there. His hair was damp from a shower, but not ours. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes tired. He froze for half a second, then forced a smile. "You're up early," I pointed at the clock. Then at his close. My silence hung between us, heavy and loud. He sighed, setting his bag down. It's not what you think. I picked up my notepad and scribbled fast, my hand trembling. Then tell me what it is. He rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding my eyes. Talia's brother. He was in an accident. I was helping her out. I stared at him, feeling the words like shards of glass. He said it so easily, like he'd rehearsed it. Like it wasn't a lie he'd told before. I shook my head slowly. He frowned. Why are you looking at me like that? You don't trust me anymore? I wanted to scream, You've given me no reason to! But again, nothing came out. Just a faint rasp of air. That's when his expression hardened. You know what, this constant suspicion? It's exhausting. I can't keep proving myself. He grabbed his keys again and stormed out before I could even reach for him. The door slammed. I stood there, trembling, the note in my hand, the sound of silence echoing like thunder. That was the day I decided to find out for myself. If I couldn't speak the truth, I'd see it. I remembered Talia's social media. She was one of those people who shared everything. Brunch photos, gym selfies, office parties. I'd followed her months ago, back when she was just Malik's funny coworker. I opened her page, my hands shaking, and there it was, a photo posted just hours ago. Her and Malik at a seaside resort, arms around each other, drinks in hand. His smile, the one I hadn't seen in months, wide and easy. The caption read, Some people bring peace without saying a word. The irony wasn't lost on me. My breath caught, and for a moment I thought I might actually scream, but all that came out was a soundless sob. I scrolled further. There were more photos, dinners, long drives, late-night stories. All the pieces of my life, now repurposed for someone else. Each picture was a knife, carving away what little denial I had left. I don't remember much about the rest of that day. I just remember sitting in the dark, the glow of my phone lighting up my tear-streaked face. My notebook lay open in front of me, but I couldn't write. There were no words left that could hold the kind of pain I felt. When Malik came home that evening, I was still sitting there. He stopped in the doorway, his smile faltering when he saw my phone on the table, Talia's photo still open. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then I stood up and walked toward him, holding the phone out like evidence in a courtroom. He didn't even look surprised. He just exhaled slowly, setting his bag down. You weren't supposed to see that, I froze. Weren't supposed to see that. Not, it's not what you think. Not let me explain, just resignation. The kind that comes when someone has already moved on. I wrote furiously, my tears smudging the ink. How long? He hesitated. Then, quietly, Since before your accident. The world tilted. Before. So while I was lying in a hospital bed fighting for my life, he was already halfway out the door, halfway into someone else's arms. I stared at him, shaking my head in disbelief. My chest felt tight, my throat burning. I tried to speak, to push out why, but my voice cracked and died before it even formed. He looked away. I didn't plan it, he muttered. It just happened. You were different after the accident. You shut down. You stopped being you. I slammed the notebook down on the table. My hand flew across the page. I didn't stop being me, Malik. You stopped seeing me. He read it, his jaw tightening. You don't understand what it's like. You think it's easy watching someone fade into silence every day? He stopped himself, swallowing hard. I took another pen stroke, shaking from rage. You needed someone who could make you feel less guilty. He didn't deny it. And that silence, his silence, said everything. The next morning, he was gone. No goodbye, no note. Just his closet half empty and the faint scent of cologne on the pillow beside me. I called my mother. Well, tried to call. My voice still wasn't back, and when she answered, all she heard were sobs. She rushed over within the hour, wrapping me in her arms as I shook. She cried too, whispering, "Oh, baby." He doesn't deserve you. Her words were meant to comfort, but all I could think was, then why does it still hurt so much? Days turned into weeks. Malik moved in with Talia. Word spread fast. His family knew, his co-workers knew. Everyone knew. And yet somehow I became the villain in their story. His sister stopped calling. His mother sent a message through a cousin. You should let him go. A man needs a wife who can stand beside him, not depend on him. Those words replayed in my head for days. Not depend on him, as if illness had made me less of a woman. As if love came with fine print, for better or worse, unless it's inconvenient. One night I stood before the mirror again, touching the faint scar on my neck. I looked at the woman staring back, hollow eyes, tired face, trembling hands, and whispered the only word I could manage. It was small, raspy, barely there, but it was mine. Enough. That one sound broke something open inside me. It wasn't strong or beautiful, but it was real, and in that whisper, I found the beginning of myself again. That was the night I decided, if the world wouldn't listen, I'd make them see. I started small. Therapy, writing, volunteering at the speech recovery center. I began to rebuild, one word, one breath at a time, and though Malik had taken my voice once, he would never have my story. Healing didn't come all at once. It came in fragments, quiet mornings, shaky breaths, small victories that no one else saw. At first, even leaving the apartment felt like walking into a world that had forgotten me. People spoke too loudly, too quickly, like my silence made them uncomfortable. But I kept showing up, to therapy, to physical rehab, to speech recovery sessions where strangers sat in circles, learning to say their names again. It was humbling, being surrounded by others who'd also lost their voices, not all to injury, some to trauma, grief, heartbreak. There was a man named Derek, who stuttered after his wife's death, a teenage girl named Noor, who hadn't spoken since witnessing her father's accident, and me, the woman who'd been told she was too quiet to keep. We'd sit together, practicing vowels and breathing. I remember the first time I managed to say my name out loud again. It was soft, rough around the edges, but it came from somewhere deep, somewhere alive. Nah. Daya, I croaked. My speech therapist smiled through tears. That night, I went home and said it again and again in front of the mirror. Nadia. My name. My identity. My belonging. For the first time, I didn't feel invisible. Meanwhile, Malik had vanished from my life, or at least tried to. But people talk, especially in our community, where gossip travels faster than truth. One afternoon, Jasmine stopped by, her eyes wide with news. You're not going to believe this, she said, dropping onto my couch. Talia's pregnant. I froze. She bit her lip. And Malik's family. They're throwing her a baby shower. His mom's been posting pictures already. They're acting like you never existed. Her words should have crushed me, but they didn't. They settled instead, like dust on a wound that had already scarred over. I nodded slowly, my throat tightening. Not from pain this time, but from something else, resolve. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and pulled out my old laptop. It had been months since I'd last opened it. The light flickered across my face as I typed the first entry in what would become my new beginning. They tried to silence me. They thought losing my voice meant losing my worth. But silence doesn't mean surrender. I didn't know who I was writing to. Maybe the world, maybe myself. But it felt right. Words had always been my strength, and even if I couldn't speak them yet, I could write. So I wrote. Every night about the accident. About Malik, about how easy it is to be erased when you're quiet, and about how healing isn't loud, it's steady. It's breathing when you don't want to. It's waking up and choosing yourself again. Months passed. My voice therapy continued, my speech improving bit by bit. My counselor suggested sharing my writing online. You never know who might need to hear it, she said. So one trembling evening, I created a blog. I called it Silent Strength. The first post was titled, When I Lost My Voice. I didn't use names. I didn't need to. I just told the truth, raw, real, without bitterness. I wrote, When I couldn't speak, I learned how to listen, not to others, but to myself. I learned how loud silence can be when it's full of pain, and how powerful it becomes when it's filled with purpose. I hit publish, and something unexpected happened. The next morning, there were dozens of comments. Women, some strangers, some friends I hadn't heard from in years, sharing their own stories. Betrayal, abandonment, illness, loss. They all said the same thing in different words. Thank you for saying what we couldn't. For the first time, I realized my voice had never truly left me. It had only changed shape. A few weeks later, I got an invitation. It came from the Speech Recovery Center. They were hosting a small event for survivors to share their journeys. You've inspired a lot of people here, the coordinator wrote. Would you tell your story? I almost said no. The idea of standing in front of people speaking again terrified me. But something in me whispered, do it. So I practiced. Every night. My therapist helped me pace my breathing, strengthen my tone. I recorded myself, again and again, until the sound of my own voice stopped feeling strange. The day of the event arrived. Bright and clear. I stood backstage, hands trembling, my scar visible under the soft lights. Jasmine was in the front row, smiling proudly. When they called my name, Nadia Amin, I took a deep breath and stepped forward. The microphone loomed like a test. For a moment, I felt that old fear rise, the fear of being unheard, unseen. But then I remembered every sleepless night, every note, every word I'd written when no one was listening, and I spoke. My voice cracked at first, but then it found its rhythm. Slow, low, certain. I used to believe my voice was everything, I said, the audience silent, that without it, I was nothing. But I learned that strength doesn't come from how loud you can speak. It comes from how deeply you can stand in your truth. I told them about Malik, not as a villain, but as a chapter. About the accident, the silence, the rebuilding, people cried. Some stood. When I finished, the applause filled the hall, warm and thunderous. I smiled through tears. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel broken. I felt whole. But the universe has a strange way of circling back. A few days after the event, my blog post started spreading, shared by readers, reposted on social media, quoted in articles about recovery and resilience, and somehow, Malik saw it. I knew because he called. His name flashed on my phone screen, a name I hadn't seen in nearly a year. My heart stuttered, but I answered. Nadia? His voice was hesitant, familiar. I said nothing at first. Just breathed. I read what you wrote, he said after a long pause. You're amazing. I didn't realize how much I hurt you. I stayed quiet, listening to the man who once left me for being silent, now stumble over his own words. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, he said softly. You didn't deserve that. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm, steady, the kind that could move mountains. I know, I said, and then gently, Goodbye, Malik. I hung up. And just like that, the last echo of my old life faded. For the first time in years, the silence around me wasn't empty. It was peace. The days after that call felt strangely light, not because everything was perfect, but because I'd finally stopped carrying things that weren't mine to hold. Regret, blame, his guilt, my silence. I let them go, one by one, like paper boats in a river that no longer frightened me. My blog, Silent Strength, kept growing. What started as a whisper between women became a quiet revolution. Survivors, healers, caretakers, people from all over began to write to me, not because they pitied me, but because they recognized themselves in my story. They weren't just reading my words, they were reclaiming their own. A small publishing platform reached out one afternoon. They wanted to feature my story in an anthology about women overcoming adversity. When I signed the agreement, I laughed. Not the polite kind, but the deep, full kind I hadn't heard from myself in years. Jasmine was the first to celebrate. She showed up with a bottle of sparkling cider and 2 mismatched glasses. To the girl who lost her voice, she toasted, and found the world listening. We clinked glasses, laughing. It wasn't a loud celebration, but it was ours. A few months later, life offered me one last confrontation, not out of cruelty, but closure. I was at a charity gala for speech recovery patients, speaking as one of the guest panelists. The event was elegant, soft lighting, gentle music, the hum of polite conversation. Halfway through the evening, while I was mingling with attendees, I felt someone's gaze across the room. I turned. It was Malik. Older, thinner. A faint shadow of the man I once loved, or thought I did. Beside him was Talia, her hand resting protectively on the arm of a small boy, their son. For a moment, time folded. I could almost feel the echo of who I used to be, standing small in the corner of their story. But then I remembered, I wasn't her anymore. He walked over slowly, uncertain. "Nadia," he said, almost whispering. "You look good." I smiled, soft and distant. "Thank you." Talia looked at me, eyes wary but not cruel. "We've read your book," she said. "It was powerful." "Thank you," I replied again. There was a pause, that awkward, heavy silence that used to make me crumble. But now, it was mine to command. "I'm happy you found peace," Malik finally said, eyes flicking down, unable to hold mine for long. "I did," I said simply, "and I hope you do too." And with that, I excused myself. No tears, no anger, just quiet grace. As I walked away, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror near the exit, poised, composed, radiant in a way pain can't dull. It struck me then. Healing isn't about going back to who you were. It's about becoming someone new. Someone freer. A few weeks later, I received a letter in the mail. No return address, just a neat handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a simple note. "Your story saved me. I was planning to end everything until I read your blog. You reminded me that silence can heal too." There was no name, just a heart drawn at the bottom. I held that note for a long time, tears streaming silently, because in that moment, I realized something profound. The very thing that once made me feel worthless had become my gift to the world. My silence had spoken life into others. One evening, months later, I visited the ocean. It was the same place Malik once promised we'd build our future, a place that had witnessed both my breaking and my rebirth. The wind was cool, the sky bleeding gold into the waves. I stood at the edge of the water, the tide kissing my feet, and whispered the words I'd once been too afraid to say. "I forgive you." Not for him. For me. Because forgiveness, I learned, isn't about excusing what someone did. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of their choices. As the waves rolled in, I closed my eyes and listened, to the rhythm of the sea, to the steady hum of my own breath, to the faint, unwavering sound of my voice, small but alive, steady but strong. It wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was mine. And that was enough. When I left the beach that night, I didn't look back. Because I'd already been through the storm. And this time, I was walking toward the calm, final monologue, voiceover style. They said I was too quiet to be remembered. But silence has its own kind of power. It listens. It learns. It waits. When I lost my voice, I thought I lost myself. but I was only shedding the noise of who they wanted me to be. Now I speak softly, but every word carries everything I survived. And that is the sound of my silence.